Okay, so we've got four signees today. KJ Costello, grad transfer from Stanford. Good quarterback, did a lot of good things. I've seen him play. We played against him, too, as a matter of fact, at Washington State. Rufus Harvey, Starkville High School, playmaker. That guy kind of jumps off the screen and is really dynamic with the ball. Jamari Stewart, outside linebacker, St. Lucie West Centennial High School in Florida. Tall, long defensive end. And those guys are always dynamic in pass rush, plus they get bigger. Kyle Cass, defensive back, Delta Community College. Very complete player, physically built and an explosive guy. Still have a couple scholarships remaining. If potential kids pop up, which we did deliberately, because there's been kids pop up from one year to the next, and so we didn't want to diminish all of our options. Really impressed with the class signed by the previous staff in our recruiting department, and then Dave Emmerich and Brittany for bridging the gap between our staff and the transition and that. But we're really impressed with the class signed, excited to have everybody on board. So not quite as climactic as it used to be back when it was the entire class, but nevertheless, it's a thrill a minute. So anyway, any questions?
Questions, please raise your hand. Please state your name and affiliation so Coach can get familiar with you.
You could holler out probably. It's a pretty – anyway, go ahead.
Coach, Steve Robertson with genespage.com, 247 Sports. You had an opportunity to get out and have some in-home visits with some of those signees from December. Having a chance to go sit and visit with those guys, what were your impressions of those players?
I was really impressed. First of all, I thought they were quality athletes, quality players. The other thing that reinforced how important football is in the state of Mississippi, and then also it reinforced what Mississippi State means to this state and the opportunities it provides for those student athletes. And I did go all over the state, cobwebbed it all over the state, top, bottom, sideways, crossways, the whole thing. Ate at some great places, and to be perfectly honest, seldom knew where I was at as I was going there, but it was exciting, and I look forward to seeing even more.
Hey, Coach. Matt St. Jean, WTVA. With the signing of KJ Costello, you got a pretty crowded quarterback room. How are you going to manage that in the spring with kind of the QB competition?
Well, its sequence is pretty good because now we have one in each class. We didn't have one in the senior class. I think it'll be a very competitive position, and by spring, I hope they can all throw strikes, and if they can, we're going to sort out the best one from there. In the end, it's the guy that moves the offense the best, but one way to do that, if you can throw strikes, you can make six positions good, and so we want the opportunity to have six positions producing out there on the field. There, go ahead. Oh, yeah. Those microphones are handy, aren't they? I mean, I'm going to get one for my living room sometime. All right, go ahead.
Paul Jones, 24/7 Sports. You mentioned KJ earlier on. Talk about that relationship, where it got started. Obviously, he was a guy that you probably had targeted when you were at Washington State.
Well, once he went, once he got his release, went on the portal, we contacted him. We're very familiar with that high school. He went to Santa Margarita High School in Southern California, and I've had a number of players from there. I've had a center from there. I've had two receivers, and he was very good friends with Kyle Sweet, a receiver that recently graduated from our place. And then also I had a D lineman from there, and I'm probably leaving out one or two others. But we've really had good success with players from that school, and part of it is where he came from. And then I was familiar with him coming out of high school. And then, as I said, we played against him, and he was looking for a place where he'd have the chance to throw the ball more, and so we feel fortunate to have him. But then the dialogue kind of happened naturally. We already knew a bunch of the same people, including his head football coach, who I thought was a great coach. And so so it went, and yeah, so it was a good deal, and we're thrilled to have him.
Joel Coleman, Starkville Daily News. Rufus Harvey from right down the road here at Starkville High. I think this was kind of an offer that he always kind of wanted, and of course he got it and signed with you guys today and things. What did you see from him upon your arrival here that made you want to bring Rufus Harvey over here?
He's really good with the ball in his hands. I think that'd be the quickest way to describe it. Pretty complete player as far as being productive on special teams and on offense. And it's kind of like in some plays it'd be kind of inexplicable how it happened, but very productive with the ball in his hands.
Hey, Mike, Tyler Horka with the Jackson Clarion Ledger. You mentioned having a quarterback from each class now. How important is it to have a guy like KJ who's a proven starter at a Power 5 program, and especially considering Mississippi State didn't have a guy last year with that kind of experience going into spring camp and then the season?
Well, I think it's beneficial really for everybody. I think it's beneficial for everybody. The other thing in those quarterback rooms, quarterbacks will learn something one from the other, and then they'll pick up the strong parts that one guy has. So I think that's beneficial, and I think it'll be a very competitive position.
Hey, Mike, Ben Portnoy from the Columbus Commercial Dispatch. The last couple of years, you've obviously had success with graduate transfer quarterbacks, whether that's Anthony Gordon or Gardner Minshew. How much of that was a selling point for KJ, and when you got into that room and started talking to him about what he could do at Mississippi State?
He was pretty familiar with what we did. We played against him twice, I believe. Yeah, 2 times, and so. He liked the way that we threw it, and of course always knew about 3 people on our team when it happened. So, and then the last time we played, we had kind of a nail biter with when Gardner Minshew was there. They went down and scored what they thought was the final touchdown, and then we had a heck of a drive and kicked a field goal to win it. But we were really quite familiar with one another. It's not, KJ's kind of a stranger, to Mississippi, but he really wasn't a stranger to most of our offensive staff.
Obviously, you hadn't had a full recruiting cycle yet in Mississippi and in this region, but just your first impression of what you saw from the in-state kids in this class and your time spent around them, whether it be watching film or in-home visits?
Very talented, committed. The best football players are guys that don't just like football, that need football, and I think there's a lot of that. And then I'll tell you the other thing, the excitement about Mississippi State. A lot of these guys starting way back long before I got here, and really probably before that, if you count their parents, have had an excitement towards Mississippi State football. So,
Logan Lowry, Daily Journal, in Tupelo. A lot of times when a new coaching staff comes in, what had been signed in December kind of goes into disarray. Just how were you able to keep those guys on board that were previously signed?
Yeah, we went and saw. There were 10 on campus, but then I went and saw all the others that had signed. And deliberately did that because I wanted them to feel secure about their decision. And then the other thing is, start getting acquainted with them and their family, even though I, kind of missed that initial window, try to make up for lost time. So we did that. So it was a very busy and vigorous 2.5 weeks, covering as much ground as we could. And then prior to that, I called them all too. So, with regard to that, it's never perfect. You always wish you knew somebody better, but we covered as much ground as we could, and I felt like in a quality fashion quite quickly.
Mike Garikoch, Commercial Dispatch. I know you've been on the job for a little less than a month, but have you seen any differences from recruiting kids to Starkville than you did in, let's say, Pullman?
Yeah, you go 3 hours from home instead of all the way to American Samoa or to South Florida. Yeah, that instead of a 4,000-mile circle, we have about a 4-hour one, you see. Now that and the fact that, just the concentration of players that are here and the quality of players that are here nearby. So, You know, it's you get more FaceTime with them. You know, I got a lot of FaceTime with airplanes. You know, out there on the West Coast, which, you know, and it's a great region and just great geography, and everything's different one place to the next. But here, you know, what's exciting is you can see a lot of recruits quickly, and then and I think you know, you got the benefit of a little more you know, quality time as far as getting to know one another. And then the other thing is as we go into spring, I'm sure there'll be a lot of unofficial visits and people on campus where they'll get to see our product on the field quite quickly and thoroughly in a fashion that was more difficult.
Coach, you brought in a bunch of your coaches from Washington State. How have they adjusted to kind of life in Mississippi over the past month and like bonded with the team so far?
I think pretty well. I mean, they're from everywhere, you know. I mean, they're from everywhere, and most of them have Southeast connections at some point in their career or another. So it's not, you know, it's not as foreign a space as people think, you know. I mean, I think that, you know, between, you know, a lot of several years that I've spent in this region, you know, you got a bunch of them that have been down here. Of course, Mason's from Georgia, and then Spurrier's from somewhere between Florida and North Carolina, and then Nichols from Dallas, and then Melee coached in North Carolina. So, you know, it's not really a group that's devoid of contact through this area, whether recruiting or actually being in a school here. So I think that adjustment's been good, but you always do it kind of on a scramble initially, you know, because you're always in a hurry, and, you know, you got your suitcases in a hotel and off you go. So,
Brian Haydad from Super Talk, Mississippi. You got your coaching staff finalized just last week with the addition of Jason Washington. For you now, this next, you know, month or so before spring training begins, what is the most important thing for that staff to be working on and for your players to be working on in the next, say, few weeks?
Well, I mean, obviously the off season's the most important thing, but also they'll have the chance, you know, they can go out there and work out and throw themselves. And, you know, we just need to when they go out there and work, they need to be working and diligent on their own about doing the things that, you know, are going to start steering them towards an understanding of what we want to do defensively. And I think it'll happen relatively quickly, but there'll always be some growing pains, and there'll always be, you know, go here, not there. But then by the same token, I guess one of the bigger challenges for everybody's going to be, as we analyze the roster, you want to put somebody in a position to do what they do best in whatever capacity they can contribute to the team. And then evaluating the roster, I think, is going to be one of the biggest, most important things this spring.
Coach, when your last 4 or 5 years at Washington State, you signed almost as many kids from the state of Florida as you did the state of Washington. In-state recruiting at Mississippi State's a little different. You know, with your experience kind of having to reach out across state lines to fulfill your classes, how do you kind of use that same approach at Mississippi State to kind of expand the recruiting footprint?
Get the best ones closest that you can, and then you know, extend it out as you have to, but don't ignore real quality guys that are really interested in your program. You know, sometimes a relative went there, sometimes a guy's just curious, sometimes, you know, someone really likes the major there, you know, and that type of thing. But, you know, no matter where they're at, if they're really interested in you, I don't think you ignore them. But by the same token, I don't think you go pound the bricks any further than you need to. And in this state, you know, the players in Mississippi have a real identity with Mississippi State. So I think you're, you know, it's important to stay closer, because that's the smartest way to do it, because there's a lot of people here that are inclined to stay close to home. So.
Like Ben Portnoy, Commercial Dispatch, kind of in that vein, obviously, between your staff, whether it's Darcel or others. I mean, you guys have a lot of Texas connections. How much do you anticipate being able to kind of recruit the state of Texas, given your background there and others on the staff, and sort of being able to expand that footprint a little bit?
Well, we're not going to ignore it, but of course we'll utilize the contacts to, you know, uncover quality players, you know, and and as they're interested in what we have going on, we'll sift through it and see who contributes to what we're looking for, and then of course you don't want to fly over the top of players to go get other players, any more than necessary. So.
Joel Coleman, Starfield Daily News again. We were talking quarterbacks earlier with, I guess, now 5 scholarship guys in that room. Could you see a scenario where there's some attrition there, or do you see all those guys kind of sticking it out and competing and just staying here and seeing how it works out?
I don't have any idea. I mean, that's impossible for me to say. We haven't got to that point, and I don't know exactly where everyone's head's at. I mean, we hope they stay, but the reality is that guys want to get on the field, and that's understandable. And so, and there's no way that we're going to play 5 quarterbacks. As a matter of fact, in the end, we're not going to rep 5 quarterbacks. We're going to see where they're at, but. I mean, there's no way to rep 5 quarterbacks, and this isn't PE, so we're going to have to make some choices, and they'll be tough choices because these are motivated people that want to do good things, and some of them may become great quarterbacks down the road as they develop, but the time's just not now. But in the end, we're going to have to be pretty disciplined on settling on 2 guys.
Mike Garikoch, Commercial Dispatch again. Since we last talked to you, Kylan Hill decided to stay for his senior year. How critical is he going to be for that running back room and maybe the wisdom he can pass on to the younger running backs that you recruited?
Well, I mean, I'm excited that he's here. He's a dynamic player, and he seems to be having a great off season. So I'm excited about the opportunity to work with him, and looking forward to it. Looking forward to getting to know him better too.
You mentioned keeping a couple of scholarships open to see what might pop up. Is there any positions in particular where you're going to be looking at the transfer market?
I would say, difference maker athlete, period. A really good inside linebacker, I think, would be one area that, we could use a little more depth on. And then also I'd say offensive line.
About a month into the off-season program, just what kind of feedback have you gotten from the players since they started all that?
They seem to like it quite a bit, and I knew that we were going to kind of raise the bar as far as the workload and the work level and the variety of things that we asked them to do. But, they've really embraced it. And I would say I would categorize it as enthusiastic, positive feedback, occasionally tired.
Coach Jeff, back to your conversations with KJ, having him have a personal relationship with Gardner as a competitor, would that factor in at all? I mean, him being a resource for him to kind of understand what the Mike Leach offensive system was about?
Maybe, I don't know. The other thing is there were a number of players that played in that offense. River Craycraft, who, he played high school with, and Kyle Sweet, who he played high school with, who were receivers, so they would be right in the wheelhouse of what we were doing there. And so, I don't know per se. I mean, I think though, at this point, Gardner's a great resource. Somebody to talk to that has a connection with the state of Mississippi, who's not so far off because his, family comes through here. He's got a couple sisters going here, and to talk to, bounce ideas off, and I know Gardner would be very open to that. So, and he always is. And Gardner's crazy competitive. And so, I do think I think if it's not a good resource now, I think it'll evolve to be.
Coach, you mentioned the quarterback game, and obviously a number of guys in there. In terms of past history, how have you kind of handled quarterback situations and in terms of quarterback competitions? And is that something that you'd like to come out of the spring with a starter, or is that something you're willing to wait till fall camp?
I don't plan to come out of spring with the starter because I think you always compete for your position. So I do not plan to do that. I plan to figure out where everyone's at and, first teach them the offense, figure out where everyone's at. And as we figure out who's ahead, then we're going to have to channel the reps towards the guys that are ahead, and then go through spring like that. But we want to do the best we can to give them the knowledge and the skills to as they go for the next off season after spring to develop those skills and compete at as high a level as they can again in camp, then check where they're at there, and then pare it down till you get to about 2. So we want to keep it competitive throughout, but then, you know, as you compete for reps and you perform better, then you're going to get more reps. And so, yeah, it'll be a challenge this spring, but and then, you know, if you're in, we'll have 2 skills going, so that'll help. You know, but if you give 5 guys even reps, you'll successfully make 5 people extremely average. So, and that's, you know, I mean, I'd love to do it, but I don't have. Well, first of all, there's the 20-hour rule, so I don't have that many. Then I don't have 5 full sets of productive offensive linemen, or 5 full sets of receivers, and 5 full sets of running backs, and so then the product diminishes there, and you know you're working on something, but you're really not working on execution. You know. All right. I guess that's it before you guys think of another one. All right, thanks.